All right, cool. So I'm going to talk about basically the title of my presentation is Defending the Castle. I'm going to be talking about like security in depth and how I kind of do that with my, my WordPress blog. So there's a couple overarching themes within this presentation. Security in the enterprise and your role, trying to help like newcomers to security kind of understand what's your role in security. Once you first go in co-op, you kind of start to understand, but until you get to co-op, it's kind of hard to understand what are you supposed to be doing and all these different things in security. So trying to help newcomers. Talking about detection versus prevention. Prevention is really hard to implement and do it right without breaking things. And I'm going to show a plethora of different ways where I implemented prevention and broke tons of things. So kind of helping people with that. Again, the security in depth model, talking about the onion model, having multiple layers of security and not just having one big brick wall. And then showing how test cases are important. Those test cases that were super annoying in CS that you always had to write all the time, they're actually super important in the real world. So security to newcomers, I remember sitting here as a freshman listening to news every single week going, why do companies keep getting breached? How do you not detect 10 terabytes of data just going straight out on the tube, right? How do you not change your default password on things? Why were they using vulnerable like dependencies and libraries and apps? Why are these things keep happening? And it's frustrating as a newcomer to sit here and listen to all this. And when you go on co-op and you get into the real world, you kind of realize reality that security is hard, right? That's the overarching theme, is it's just really hard. You can't secure what you don't know. If you don't know that something's there, you can't secure it. Updates also break things, right? Just because there's an update to fix a vulnerability doesn't mean you can't just apply it and then the problem's gone. It may break things for your actual product, right? And these are things that are really hard to understand until you get to the workforce. Also, security controls. If your security controls don't detect that something like your email server still has default passwords, maybe your security controls aren't doing their job, right? Maybe it isn't the IT admin who set it up, but you didn't detect it as well, right? You're part of that. You're part of the problem if your security controls aren't detecting, right? So maybe you messed up, right? Try and think how you may be able to help the business with your security controls. So if we had security our way, right? If you've read a lot of APT reports and a lot of security things, one of the biggest ways, I think the last report I read said like most initial compromises in networks, 90% of them are done via email, right? So our potential solution might be like, yeah, it'd be great if you deleted all your emails, that way we won't get popped, right? But that's not a real solution, right? And a lot of people have that type of mindset that if anything poses risk, let's just not do it, right? Let's just sweep it under the rug, let's get rid of it, let's not do it at all. But that doesn't allow the company to evolve and become better. So you need to be able to assess the risk and be able to move with it. So a good security team will actually detect risk, right? Actually find it, right? Assess the risk to the actual business, right? Is that risk going to lose them money? Is it going to lose them brand recognition? Things like that. Report the actual risk to senior leadership to help them make an informed decision, right? And sometimes you may not like their decision, right? It may cost $10 zillion to implement an actual prevention plan, but it's more cheaper to buy cyber insurance. So that if you get attacked that way, you just have cyber insurance payout. I'm not saying that that's a good way of doing it, but that may be an actual decision that people make, right? And based on their actual action, you have to take appropriate actions, right? And this is kind of the hard thing, is that as security, we need to be able to assessing risk and making sure that the people that make decisions make the best decision for our actual company. So some toxic mindsets that I've kind of see in security over and over again is people who always yell, fix all the things, right? And they just yell, fix it, but they don't actually help fix the problem. That's terrible, right? Being that type of person in security who just says, fix all the things, and then doesn't sit there and help the actual problem, people actually start to resent you and not want to work with you. I actually went to a meetup with DevOps people and said that their security team actually just says, fix this, it's vulnerable, and then walks away. Doesn't actually help them, right? And they actually hate working with their security team. They actually think that their security team is a bunch of idiots. That was their words, not mine. And that's a really, really bad thing, is that if people don't want to work with you, right, we have this big problem if you can't secure what you don't know. If people aren't willing to work with you as a security team. People who always say no because it poses risk, right? If you can't, you have to be able to accept some type of risk so that the company can evolve, right, and move with them. So good security teams will be there to provide answers to people's questions, right? So if they have answers about security or a good way of going about something, you can help them with that, right? a lot of good security teams will also act as like a service for other teams, is saying, hey, we want to, let's say, I don't know, the web app team wants to make like a new web app, right, for the company, right? And they're saying, hey, we want to do this securely, right? But we want to get your decision and your input here at the early stages, right? That makes all the difference, is that if you as a security team are trusted by the rest of the teams in your company and they call you in when they're starting a new project saying, hey, we'd like your input, right? You can put security in at the foundation level. And as we all know, security at the foundation level is the best way to do it, right? Build security at the beginning, not add it on later. So really try and make sure that you're really helping people and you're not trying to be those two top people who are just yelling things all the time. So kind of some story time. So I knew a coworker who worked in the gaming industry. His security team found a remote code execution vulnerability so the attackers could actually take over. They could actually like control a machine and everything like that, and they were pretty good at using this vulnerability. And they found this vulnerability and everything and went to senior leadership and said, hey, we'd like to fix this. Here's a plan to fix that. Senior leadership actually came back and said it would cost millions of dollars to fix that actual issue. Said millions of dollars, we can't do it. That was the decision. We can't update to the new version that would fix the vulnerability because it costs millions of dollars and break too many things, right? So that team, what they did at that point in time is they said, okay, we know what the attack looks like, and they created detection methods to actually detect every time the attackers use that vulnerability, right? It's not a perfect solution, but given the decisions they were given, that's the thing that they implemented, right? So just because you were given a bad answer, right, like this case, doesn't mean you should just give up, right? Think of other ways that you can protect your business. So detection versus prevention, I think we all have a pretty good idea. Detection is just say, hey, this malicious thing happened, but we're not actually stopping it. Prevention is, hey, there's this bad thing, we're going to stop it from happening at all. So I was listening to this really great podcast called Security Weekly, and they were talking about, is pen testing dead? And they were talking about this and that and pen testing and whether it's good and bad and all that. But the one really cool thing is that the guy said that on a lot of assessments, what they don't really do with their customers is help them do preventative things. What they do is help them put detection methods in place, because prevention breaks stuff, and prevention is really hard to get buy-in from people, right? But detection is really easy. Hey, we just want to monitor activities happening on your box. It's a much easier thing to say than, hey, we'd like to put a preventative thing in, and it may or may not break things, right? That's a really hard thing to get buy-in, right? So that's what they said, is they put a lot of detection. So if you can detect it, it's better than not knowing about it at all. The second thing is this B-Sides Tampa talk, where this guy talks about getting a baseline of his network with Bro. So his current network, they didn't really have any firewall rules allowing things in or out. They had things kind of incoming, some good rules there, but they weren't really like assessing the traffic that was leaving their network. So what he did is he set up Bro, and he monitored his entire network for 6 months. And then he went to the networking team and said, hey, for the past 6 months, this is all the traffic that's been going out of our network. Anything that doesn't use this list of ports, I'd like to block, right? And he did that, and the networking team had data to back up his decision, and they went through with it, and it worked out wonderfully, right? They actually didn't have that much downtime. The networking team didn't get that many complaints from other people, right? Because they had 6 months of data to back up, hey, this action that we're about to take to prevent things from happening isn't going to screw up everyone, right? It isn't going to cause massive downflow for people or downtime, right? And I thought that was a really cool way to go about it. And I think that we should all kind of take that approach. So, security through obscurity, trigger warning here. I know some people don't like security through obscurity, but I'm going to kind of touch on it. I think security through obscurity, when implemented in certain scenarios, can actually be a good thing. And you may agree or disagree. That's your opinion after this slide to make up. Security through obscurity won't stop a targeted attacker. It doesn't actually prevent the actual issue, and it doesn't actually reduce the attack surface at all. I acknowledge that. But it adds another layer that the attacker has to kind of jump over to accomplish their mission. So it's another layer for script kiddies, it's another layer for mass attacks. So my one example here is, there was a guy, and there's the link to the blog post, he changed his default SSH port for 8 hours. On the default port 22, he had 7,000 logins in 8 hours. When he changed it to port 24, he had 3 logins, right? And I think that's a really cool thing to kind of show that just changing the port had that much of an impact. Again, right? As an attacker, the sophistication of an attacker to attack someone or figure out what port 22 is right there in the bottom, right? Where I have these pictures of Nmap. You just change the port from port 22 to scan all ports. That's the layer of sophistication that has to go up a layer, right? For someone to get around security through obscurity. But let's say in the instance of a zero-day release, right? There's some type of exploit that's released for, let's say, OpenSSH, right? People who maybe like script kiddies can write a simple script to attack all IP addresses on port 22. They do that exact thing, they're going to get a lot of attacks, right? They're trying to get mass attacks, they're trying to get quantities of people that they pop, not quality, right? So in this instance, if you were to not run on port 22, you may not be attacked by them, right? Because you're not running on port 22. Things like this can actually help you, where security through obscurity in this scenario will actually help you by running on a different port with someone who's just using the default port. Things to think about. So the main course of how I run my WordPress instance, this is kind of going to be the rest of the presentation. WordPress is known for vulnerabilities. Almost everyone in this room has read some type of article recently. Even Nick has given some on different plugins being popped. 20% of the internet actually uses WordPress. It's a very popular thing. Yes, I personally understand the risks. I've actually been attacked. I've actually had to respond to incidences on my own blogging platform that uses WordPress. I've had to do all that. But I still believe that it's still a pretty good blogging platform. Just kind of some nice tips for people to know. The most popular platform for scanning for vulnerabilities in WordPress is WPS scan, or WP scan here. So most of the vulnerabilities that it scans for are for version 3 of WordPress, but WordPress is on version 5. So kind of one of those interesting things is that most of the vulnerabilities it actually scans for are for a very, very old version that's really, really old. 62% of websites are not up to date, so that's kind of like when WP scan gets a hit, it's because people aren't up to date. And 60% of the actual related incidences to WordPress that you read about are because of plugins. So I would say that plugins are a really big problem. So kind of my security and depth strategy overall. Here's kind of a big list, right? To start off, I have Ansible and documentation for everything. I can literally hit the enter key once and it'll set up my entire server for me. I don't have to do any other type of configuration or anything. I've even started the domain register level of implementing security there. I use Cloudflare for DNS, putting in VPS protection, so my virtual private server, put in protections there, protections at my WordPress instance, protections at the Nginx level, using a WAF, which is an open web application firewall implemented by BondSec. I use firewall protections, I use OS Query for monitoring, and I use this custom script, right? I use all these different things to kind of monitor my box for detection and prevention things. So Ansible and documentation, and it is infrastructure as code, right? I write how I want my box set up, I hit the enter key, and it does exactly what I want. Ansible is a really good way to kind of set up things, and I guarantee that if you set up a box one way manually, 6 months later, if you have to do it again, you won't remember how you did it. And the chances of you finding a blog post on how to do it, it may be gone, right? Write it down the first time you do it. In severe cases, you may need to delete an instance and start from scratch, right? If you have it Ansible-ized, you literally just have to hit the enter button again, and then it just resets up everything, right? And I've had to do this. I had my box popped once or twice before. I literally had to destroy that instance because I wasn't really sure of the security and the integrity of the box. I migrated the things that I needed to, hit enter on my Ansible script, and I was back up in 20 minutes, right? That's the power of this, right? So who has ever followed a blog post and it didn't work? You literally copied verbatim, literally everything on the blog post. Yeah, look, that's a big portion of the room, right? So if you do this, right, record what you did to fix it, right? Because if it happens to you again in the future, your chances of you remembering how you fix it are probably pretty slim. Record the log files that you looked at. And the websites used for documentation, write all this down, right? It makes it really easy later on that if you have to do it again, you can just go back and use these resources or these notes again. So I did something, I set up AppArmor, which is like an equivalent of SE Linux on Ubuntu. There's various opinions of AppArmor. I'm not going to get into that flame war. I see Zach about to jump out of his seat on it. I'm not trying to get into it. Yeah, it does. But anyway, Over the past couple of weeks when I implemented AppArmor, some things have been working and not working, right? And trying to figure out if it's AppArmor that's causing the problems or it's something else is a really great start. So I have in my documentation the log file where AppArmor logs to. And then I'm telling it, hey, look for all the instances in this log file that contain AppArmor and look for the thing that says denied, right? And what this can tell me real quick is AppArmor my issue? If it's not, I'm going to move on to the next thing, but this kind of helps me, and past couple of weeks it's been AppArmor that's been my problem. So this really helps me narrow down where the problem may be. So for domain registrar, this is where you purchase your domain. When you purchase your domain, you can put your real information and address of where you live, or you can put in fake data. I happen to put in fake data. Mine says 123 Blink Avenue for my address, things like that. Or you could use Namecheap, which actually provides WhoisGuard, which is all this information you're seeing here, and it provides it to you for free for life. So this is kind of one way to have one layer of abstraction to who owns the domain and things like that. So one way to protect my actual email address and things like that. Ooh, didn't know that. Apparently WhoisGuard is only available on certain TLDs.
Also, once your domain goes into the queue right after it expires, but before it's actually released into the queue, sometimes the WhoisGuard is dropped and the original register can take it.
Didn't know that.
What are the repercussions for putting fake data in that, when you're registering something?
No one's come after me, so I can't tell you. To be honest, so I use Cloudflare for DNS. Cloudflare as a service actually has pretty good security. So right off the bat, they have a good password policy and they provide two-factor for login, right? That's something to kind of think about. This is what controls your domain and where records point at. You kind of want to protect that so that someone can't get into it. So having a place that uses two-factor and a good password policy kind of shows you that they actually care about security, right? Simple things like that. They provide this really cool service for a reverse proxy. I'm going to talk about that later. And they also provide SSL certs and stuff like that. They have some of the really coolest technology I've ever seen, such as protection for DNS brute forcing. So they actually have a really cool service, and a lot of it's free. So VPS stands for Virtual Private Server. I chose DigitalOcean, although I am an AWS fanboy if you've ever talked to me. AWS has what I like to call hidden fees. So what that means is you have to, the upfront costs they show you on AWS does not include storage, and it does not include bandwidth, right? Those are additional charges, right? So it's not a flat rate fee. DigitalOcean gives you a straight flat rate monthly fee, so that means every month you're going to be paying $5. Pretty simple, that's why I chose it. I didn't want any of the hidden fees, as I so call them. DigitalOcean provides an instance that's really good for $10 a month. Again, it has two-factor login for their cloud platform. They even have a cloud firewall, which does ingress and egress. A lot of cloud platform providers only provide ingress firewalls. And they provide free hardware monitoring. So the cloud firewall is external to the actual instance. So in the event, I actually had an attacker who actually gained access to my box, and they had enough privileges to run iptables-f, that would actually not affect this firewall, right? The firewall run by DigitalOcean, right? They're not connected in any way. So that's kind of one way of layer of protection. If someone does get access to my box, they run iptables-f, does not affect these rules right here. Free resource monitoring, so I kind of have a certain threshold that all my resources run at, and I've kind of done this over a couple of months, so I kind of know what's normal in fluctuation, and I have certain thresholds set. So if a threshold is set and then something goes above it or below it, I actually get a Slack notification almost instantly, and that's done for free, which is kind of cool. I have app-cron, which basically will run app-get update every 24 hours and pull down the latest updates. It will only do security updates, but it won't apply anything else. So actual updates for other packages and things like that are done manually. A couple months ago when I actually did an update for PHP to go from PHP 7 to 7.2, it actually broke things, right? So that actually happens, right? There's just hard-coded things to the actual version number of 7.0 in WordPress, and when I upgraded 7.2, couldn't find it, right? Broke things. So I make sure to do these type of updates manually, right? So that if it breaks, I'm there to actually fix it on the spot. So hardening SSH, right? Things that we've all talked about. Disabled root. I only accept public keys. No username or password accepted. Fail to ban monitors SSH logins. So if someone tries to log in after 10 failed logins, it blocks them, right? Disable unnecessary things. And then I actually have SSH Duo login. So after I log in and accept my public key, I actually get a Duo push, which is actually really cool. So problems with hardening my SSH. Ansible, right, which I use to configure my box. If I run Ansible on SSH with Duo set up, it actually sends me a Duo push every time Ansible runs in action, right? Be quiet, Zach. So this was a problem that I ran into, right? So this kind of, one way is to kind of add an exception for Ansible to run, but then again, if the attacker knows that, that's kind of lowering my level of security there. So alternative methods have been put in place to run Ansible. Usually I use like SCP to push my Ansible to my host and then run it from there on the local host, right? So that I don't have to worry about Duo and all that. So I can kind of maintain the same level of security. If I don't have my phone on me at all times, I can't log in, and if Duo goes down, I can't get into my box, right? I depend on other things. WordPress protections. Creating and enforcing strong password policies are good. Having separate users, right? An administrative user and a blogging user, right? Have two separate things. Plugins, I try and minimize the amount of times that I use plugins, but there's these really two good ones here. The Akismet one, which is used for comments, so it helps you with spamming. WordPress just gets hit with spamming comments everywhere. I think the last time I looked at it, I had 5,000 comments, and I cleaned it out last month. So in the past month, I've gotten like 5,000 spamming comments, so this kind of helps to make sure that it takes care of all those. Duo factor, again, you need Duo to log into my WordPress instance. And also, comments can only be posted when I approve them. So if someone writes malicious JavaScript and tries to put it on my WordPress blog, I'm going to say no and delete their comment, right? And that's just a simple thing, right? People are going to try and do that. So for WordPress, we know that it's vulnerable. We know that it happens quite frequently. I have a Twitter feed for WordPress vulns, and when they occur, I get a notification on Twitter. There's this one guy that literally is on top of it every time there's a vulnerability. He literally writes a tweet for it, and I just follow that guy. So I have various login mechanisms to detect things and everything like that. I also have a Google Calendar that reminds me to actually go in and do manual updates. So I also do backups on my WordPress instance, right? So I have scripts that run on the daily, and they back up my WordPress web directory and my actual database. Stores both of those locally and on the cloud, right? So again, we talked about how issues have to be approved by me, which means if I forget about approving them or if I don't log in after a certain amount of time, comments just sit there stale and people don't get help or they don't get pushed right away. So things that kind of think about. WordPress backups actually take up considerable amount of space, and I've actually come close to actually filling up my hard disk one time and not allowing myself to log into the actual box. That was actually an actual problem. So here I was trying to do good stuff, good IT about backing up, and it almost filled up my entire hard drive. Nginx protections. So here's a list of all of them. I'm going to go through them. So server name. People, when they're lazy, usually do server score underscore name space underscore, which just says accept everything. I've set up mine to only respond to requests that contain my domain in the actual request. So if someone actually tries to obtain information from my blog with my IP address, they'll be turned away / denied, right? You have to have my domain. And the way I kind of do this is, again, kind of a little bit of security through obscurity, is that there are a finite number of IPv4 addresses, roughly around 2 billion. We know all of them. We can iterate through all of them. But there is an unlimited amount of domains, right? So it's a lot harder to kind of brute force all the domains that are possible. So that's kind of why I do that. Any scanner just using my IP address will actually be turned away, right? You actually have to come to me with your actual domain. I have things such as making sure HTTP requests automatically get updated to HTTPS. Whitelisting user agents. Another thing where I do security through obscurity. So your user agent, right? It identifies your browser and the platform that is currently trying to detect you or connect to you. So here's my user agent right here. That's it right here. It's saying, hey, I'm a Macintosh or a MacBook, and I'm connecting with Chrome here, right? That's basically what it says. It's something that the user actually controls. On my actual WordPress instance, I actually have a whitelist of user agents that can actually connect to me. So if you're not on that whitelist, you get immediately blocked and denied, immediately. So what this actually helps with is that things like Kali Linux actually have a lot of default user agents set. So WPS Scan, which is a popular tool to actually scan for vulnerabilities on a WordPress site, actually has a hard-coded user agent in of WPS Scan. You can change it. You can change it. But by default, if you don't change it and you try and scan my actual box, it actually says the host doesn't exist at all. So again, a targeted attacker will figure that out, change the username, and then you can see any vulnerabilities that I may have on my box. But initially, if you just run the tool as is out of the box without changing your username, it says my host doesn't exist, right? This is just a layer of threshold, a layer that an attacker has to get around. Here's the list of user agents here that I kind of currently accept. So anything that starts with Mozilla will be allowed. Apple's weird. They start with Safari with their one. Opera starts with Opera. Certain things that I didn't think about is at first, Googlebot. I want my website to be indexed by Google. I was originally blocking Google, so I wasn't being indexed, right? Things like Twitter couldn't index me as well. LinkedIn. The really cool one is WhatsApp down here. So if apps like WhatsApp or Messenger or those things have browser capabilities, they'll actually connect out using their user agent. So if someone sends you Hold My Beer link in WhatsApp and you click on it in the WhatsApp application, it'll actually connect to my web server using WhatsApp as a user agent, which I was initially blocking. So I figured that out. So if you're using WhatsApp and you click on a link for me, now you can actually browse to me. So that's one of those things where it actually was helping me with security, but I actually broke a lot of things too. When I actually started implementing security into my blog, this actually happened. This is Google Analytics. This is actually tracking how many users I get to my website. When I started putting security in place, it was a big drop, as you can see. So this is kind of one of those things. Is this a good drop? Is this a bad drop, right? Did I put a security control in place that actually made a bunch of people not be able to access my website? Or is this me actually blocking bots from accessing my website, and now this is actually my true identity of the amount of users that are actually accessing my website? I don't have a good answer for you. But this is kind of one of those things that kind of keep in place is that when you put security controls, something like this may happen, right? If you're Google, Facebook, Amazon, and something like you implement a security control and a drop like that happens, that's bad news. That's bad news, right? So kind of keep that in mind. What? I don't know. I wish I knew. I could get back to you. So Nginx SSL settings, I only accept version 1.2 and 1.3, only secure ciphers, and I've enabled HSTS, right? Which is after the first time someone connects to me, their browser will then kind of get like a notice that every time you connect to Hold My Beer, always use HTTPS. That's what HSTS will do. It's saying, hey, anytime you make a connection, always use HTTPS, which is good. Cloudflare reverse proxy, one of the coolest features for free that Cloudflare actually provides. So Cloudflare allows you to put your website behind them. So I'll kind of explain this. Here is your clients. So this is you guys here. Here's the puffy cloud internet. Here's Cloudflare here, and here's my web server, right? So when you actually make a request to Hold My Beer security, you go to the internet, it comes to Cloudflare. Cloudflare looks at the host, which is basically Hold My Beer security, and it'll actually forward you to me, right? And this is a really cool thing. So you actually cannot access my website without going through Cloudflare. Unless you go through Cloudflare, you cannot access me. My firewalls are set to, I will only accept HTTP connections from Cloudflare. So if you access me any other way, you'll be dropped, right? Because that's the only person I should be accepting HTTPS requests from. So kind of a cool thing. They provide DDoS protection and all this. So something I didn't know is that when you set this up at first, you actually get Cloudflare's IP address as the originator of the request, right? This is actually kind of a problem and can cause issues. So what you actually have to do is there's some kung fu that you can actually do. They can actually say, hey, there's a special header that Cloudflare actually provides you with the client's IP address. I want to pull that out and actually store that as the originator's request, not Cloudflare. So kind of things to kind of keep in mind, things I didn't know at first. What's up? So what it says is the originator, who made the request, the originator. So if I need to block someone, right, I can't actually do that. I'd be blocking Cloudflare at that point.
Is that an easy change to make, like fail to ban?
Yeah, it's a very easy change. So basically, you make a config with all the known IP addresses of Cloudflare, which is very easy to get. I have a script that automatically does this every hour, pulls down the latest IP addresses, and if anything matches these IP addresses, then it knows to grab that special header. So things I didn't know at first. So I actually had an incident where I actually got popped last semester, right? This attacker actually put malicious JavaScript on every single HTML page that I had, and every single post that I have from my blog is actually stored in a database. He actually added the JavaScript to every single database entry as well. He was actually kind of crafty. And so at first, I really didn't know that this was actually happening. It took me roughly about 2 weeks to kind of notice that this was actually happening. There was a timer on the JavaScript. It would wait roughly 10 to 15 seconds for a user before redirecting to a naughty website or doing certain things. So when I finally went through and did my actual incident, I actually created a YARA rule that allowed me to kind of say, here's what the malware looks like, and if it happens again, here are the signatures for it, and make me a notification. So I was able to kind of do that. All right, cool. Because of this JavaScript incident, I started doing content security policy, CSP, right? So it restricts the amount, it restricts the external scripts from running, right? So I had malicious JavaScript running. CSP will actually prevent that from happening, right? So one very real world thing of this actually happening is, who heard of, is it Megacart? Megacart with the Newegg breach, right, where they were stealing credit cards. They were using JavaScript to ship off the credit card numbers. That's all it was. What? Is that what it's called? Magecart? Megacart? Maybe I have it wrong. Anyway, they were literally shipping off credit card numbers because they had malicious JavaScript on a website. CSP probably would have prevented that type of attack. So I put CSP on my website because I got attacked by a JavaScript attack. And here is supposed to be a Duo login. It's supposed to be there, but it's not, right? So my website worked absolutely fine. And I was like, cool, CSP's working. I got it. My users can reach my website. There's nothing wrong. And then like a week later, I went to go create a blog post, and I couldn't log into my instance, right? So my users could access my website just fine, but me as an administrator couldn't, right? So here's me putting in a preventative measure that actually shot myself in the foot, right? So making sure that you have test cases and you test these things thoroughly is really important. ModSec, it's a web application firewall. So it monitors the HTTP traffic going in and out of my box. If it looks like malicious traffic, it'll stop it, right? So I set that up. Problems with ModSec. Browsing to the website worked fine, but I actually couldn't actually update any posts or create posts on my website. It just wouldn't let me. ModSec goes, this looks malicious, and stopped me from doing it, right? Again, worked for users, but not for administrators. So I had to kind of write in some exclusions for ModSec so that this would actually work. And then recently, Stackpole was actually trying to access my website, one very specific post, and he said he actually couldn't access it. One very specific post out of my entire blog he couldn't actually access because of ModSec. So things to kind of think about, just edge cases like that happen in security, right? Things that may or may not be able to test for. So again, test cases are important. So again, I have a firewall on the host. It updates itself every hour by pulling the IP addresses of actual Cloudflare down and saying, hey, I will only accept HTTP traffic from Cloudflare, right? That happens on the actual host. So I actually copy and pasted a script from GitHub to do this, and I audited the code, and it looked fine. The one thing I didn't look at hard enough was that the script only writes rules for HTTPS, so port 443, but it didn't do it for port 80. So that meant if anyone went to my website on port 80, they were just immediately dropped and denied, right? So again, not proper testing, right? Stuff happens. So I have OS Query. I pulled configs straight from Palantir. They have really good configs for OS Query. Basically, it's monitoring all the services for WordPress to actually run. So if one of those services goes down, I get a Slack notification instantly. Any of my security controls that are stopped working, OS Query will let me know unless OS Query itself stops. I haven't figured out what to do in that case. And then if any of my configs that I have set up are modified, I'll get a notification as well. So, and then last but not least, my one thing that I have done additionally is I have this thing called Web Checker. It's a Python script that runs externally. So it runs on my home server, and this script will actually check my website every 5 minutes to make sure that it's up. And it will do everything that I kind of just talked about, all the things that I messed up. Web Checker actually makes sure that those test cases and those things that I failed on, it's actually implemented, right? So if I kind of go back one step or make a mess up on something, Web Checker will actually knows that and let me know. So again, test cases are important. Future works implementing scripts to sinkhole, like malicious domains and better egress rules. So takeaway, your role as a security person in an enterprise, we kind of talked about that in the beginning. Just because something is vulnerable doesn't mean you can't protect it. I think I've nailed that in pretty hard about all the protections I put in for my WordPress thing, right? You can build lots of different protections in lots of different ways. Prevention is hard to get right, but detection is easier to implement. So start out with detection and move to prevention. Don't cry wolf to everything, or don't say no to everything, that poses a risk. Try and work with people and work with your company. So any final questions? Hi.
Have you ever received a duo push notification that you didn't start, like from an action that you didn't do? As an
No, but I want to. To be honest, I've always wanted to do a push that I didn't do, so that would prompt me to need to do IR. I'm not going to lie. Anyone else got questions?
You started your website in November, was it?
No, well, that was just kind of Google Analytics for the last 180 days. I started one 3 years ago.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so this is over 3 years.
Got it.
Was that vulnerability found, or like that got exploited, was it a plugin?
No, it was actual core WordPress. So, yeah. So that was kind of one of those big ones that everyone knew about, and I guess he knew about the exploit before everyone else did, so.
If you were to redo your website over again from the beginning, would you still use WordPress?
If I were to redo my website, would I still use WordPress? That's a good question. Yes. To be honest, it's just simple. I really just want something that I can just blog and it just takes care of everything I need to do, and WordPress does that. I have a lot of things integrated. There are certain plugins that I use that I didn't show here on the board of things that just happen automatically with WordPress that if I used any other platform would just be a pain to do with. So again, it's just more, not from a security standpoint, but from a user standpoint, it just makes it dead simple to do. And that's all I want. Anything else? Cool.